Obviously, you found some errors there.
Med, I have an issue to import all the decks. Can you try it on your side, please?
Should me and Oscar share the slides, or will you be sharing?
Well, I will be sharing, but then we can give you the control so that you can control your slides.
Oh, excellent, thanks.
Okay, so I'm just trying to.
Med,
Yes.
I have an issue to import all slide deck.
Yeah, I will be sharing those. So.
Oh, thanks for this. I'm not sure what happened.
You just wait for a few minutes before we start.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that you just start. So welcome to the to this NMOP interim meeting that will be focusing on the CMAP. The session is recorded as any other, I would say, formal IETF meeting. The note well, if you are not familiar with the I would say the various I would say pointers there, please make yourself familiar with. If you have any questions or clarifications, just feel free to drop to contact the chairs if any. So this is the agenda for our meeting today. So this will be an update of the activities that will be provided by Olga. So just so that you can sync on what happened since the last IETF meeting. Then there's a slot from Oscar about the need or the requirement or no requirement, whether we need to have, I would say, link state information on the as part of the core data model. Then there's another slot from Pierre and Vivek about the an approaches to extend the CMAP models. Then we have an item which is actually shared or common between, I would say, NMOP and also the IV about some comments from Olga on the passive topology. I see Daniele online, so please, Daniele, if there's something which is really specific to IV staff, don't hesitate, I would say, to jump in. And the point here is to have something which is really, I would say, coordinated between the two working groups. And then hopefully we'll have some concrete action points and next steps for this item. So before we proceed, is there any agenda bashing? If not, we can just proceed. So this one is the document status. So there is I would say an updated version of the CMAP as we the concept document. On the data tracker, we already have version 01, but as Olga mentioned during early in the session, there is a version 02 which is ready to be submitted. The submission is there, so pending some approvals and fixing some errors. I would say the objectives are really straightforward. Try to make some progress on the CMAP concept documents. Agree on the final, I would say, contentious points about the various term concepts and the definition. Make also progress on the definition of the on the requirements, the one that are really core and the one that are really important for the operators. So I hope that we'll have some discussion on those. And yeah, and the as mentioned in the last bullet, we really want to see this document progress in order to meet the milestone we set for this document, which is actually submitted for to the ASG by next June. So that means target a working last call by May, or if you are more optimistic by April, but it will be more on the May rather than April. That's for the I would say the introduction from my side. I know, Benoit, if you want to to add any comments, so please feel free. I know that you wanted to do this one, so that's for you.
Yes, I wanted to mention and stress that I'm very happy to spend my Valentine's Day with you, and especially for the people who are in their evening somewhere east.
Yeah, so just before we go to the next one.
Go ahead.
Yes, please, Benoit, please.
I just created like a link for the meeting minutes in the chat. Feel free to help with that.
Yes, thank you. Just before we go to the next slide for I would say the that will be presented by Olga. I just want one comment that I wanted just to for at least for Adrian, even if this is not directly I would say specific to this one, is about the current working group last call we have on the terminology. So the working group last call is concluded, but there are a set of comments that need to be I would say addressed. And please, if you are planning to submit a new version, wait for next week, because Carson from the IoT Directorate Brett promised to have his review by mid next week, so that you can just have one release for this. But it's really up to you, Adrian, on that one. So that's just to on this one. So Olga, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, depending where we are. So I'll present the status and activities since the last, since IETF 121. First, some summary of activities, then GitLab issues that we had. Sorry, GitHub, yeah, closed, in progress, and open. Use case changes, requirements, what we did, the current draft, and the next steps. So you can see here, this is the summary of all the activities, and in some of them I'll go in more detail. There was initially version 00 with renaming digital map to CMAP, and then all the changes around it, resulting from IETF 121, and it was published in November. We concluded thread 1, 2, and 3. First one was about renaming concept, then about do we need topology definition, and the third one is digital map definition or CMAP definition. Since then, on the mailing list, we had some discussions about passive inventory and topology, and then discussion about bidirectional relationship between CMAP and inventory. That is on the IV mailing list, but then it was added to the NMOP. We have open issues added, and Oscar will present today the open issue whether to add some things, different approaches that we can have in regards to the state. Then we opened 7 new issues, and then we closed some of them, and I'll present which ones we closed and what the status is. There were multiple use cases being added, and really thanks everybody, like there was huge effort from different people, contributors or authors. Thanks Benoit, Oscar, Pierre, Thomas, Vivek, Sharif. I don't know, Med as well. Sorry, I didn't. So there are, I probably missed somebody, and I'll talk about use cases on slide 7. There are a lot of use cases and requirements, so it's kind of our goal was to maybe go through more of them and engage in discussion for all of them. But at the moment, the active discussion was about network design, capacity planning, and replay, post-mortem replay. On the slide XX, which is slide 7, sorry, I will, that's the slide about new requirements that were added, and there were some discussions on the mailing lists, and thanks for all engaging. It was quite active discussions both about use case and requirements. So these are some that we discussed on the mailing list, and thanks Med for initiating some of these discussions. And then there was a new version of the concept graph. Sorry, it's version 1, not 0. I was doing the slides late yesterday, so there are some typos. So I'll ask them to make the changes after the meeting. It's a version 1 that was pushed yesterday, but we will have version 2 with some changes then that Med and Benoit did pushed after the meeting. So these are the closed lab issues. I think they're all related to the things that we discussed at IETF 121, and some other issues that we think are closed. We didn't close, but we will close after the meeting. So I think for these ones, this has already been addressed in the version 0 of the CMAP concept draft. This slide shows the status of all the other open issues. So I think from the bottom we have the older one, but I will start from the top, from the latest one added. So the 2 that I added related to the Oscar comments, issues 26 and 27, Oscar will present. And as a result of this, I added 1 requirement for status. So I think Oscar, I would recommend to close. I closed this one because I opened it, but the other one we will keep open until we agree the approach that we want to take. The next issues 23 and 22 are related to how to connect from from CMAP to external things. So this is related to Pierre's and Vivek presentation. So this would be kind of addressed through their activities and maybe hackathon. There was a comment about termination point versus interface and suggestion even to clarify the difference between the two. But what I did, Oscar, I think it was your, yeah, it is your issue. There were two places where there was a reference to interface in the context of model, and I just renamed it to termination point at this point because when I looked at RFCA 345, it does have clarifications about, that interface is an example of termination point, and in most cases, I would say 95%, 90% of cases, it may be the interface, but there are some cases where termination point doesn't have to be interface. So I put it into the comments of the issue. So I don't know if you think we can close it. I would recommend to close this issue. And please interrupt me if you if you have any feedback or comments. Don't be shy. The next issue is issue 15, navigation across the abstraction levels inside the single network layer, and the comment was from Italo, asking if we would look at both, if CMAP will model both native and abstract topologies. And my suggestion is to add a requirement, but maybe because Italo was not able to join this meeting, I can discuss with him separately and see if the issue could be closed. So the next is Adrian comments about terminology, and I have a slide on that. So I think I made some proposal here, so I would like to see if there is to get some feedback. Not just comment, we didn't have time to start analyzing. Thanks, Benoit, for changes in regards to the DM supporting the full life cycle. You added information about life cycle in the inventory. So we are proposing to close this one. And this was also, I think, related to Italo's comment on the mailing list. So I'll contact him around it. The next one is add more description for each use case. So there was a lot of content being added, but there is still some work being done. So there is a slide presented later with the status of each of the use cases. And also there was a issue that was opened based on Italo's comments. Med opened it, and there were a lot of points there. So all of them were addressed except the life cycle. So I opened intentionally separate issue for that so that this one would be closed. So I propose to close this one. So I think some of them could be closed after the meeting, and maybe because Italo is not at the meeting, we will have to wait until he replies on the GitHub or tell us, via email. Any comments?
Yeah, just one reminder for the I would say the issues with Italo and so on. So please keep the mailing list on this so that everyone is, I would say, in sync and agree on the resolution of the scopes, and not only making happy with individual reviewers.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Good reminder. So I will send a question to Italo via the mailing list. Thanks. Sorry. So the next one is about the issue that Adrian opened, and here we were referring to some use cases about navigation to be able to go from service to subservice to resource, and vice versa, resource to subservice to service. But the terms service and subservice are not defined. So Adrian suggested, advised us to define service and subservice in our document and import resource. The old definition, I think, of the resource included a component, commodity, service. So in that case, it would have been, one pointing to another. So, but you change the definition of the resource that doesn't contain reference to service anymore. So I did add initial proposal in this version of the draft for service and subservice, but I do know from history that definition of the service, resource, subservice can take a lot of effort. We did it in TMF and it was years long discussion. So I don't know whether, whether we can kind of just say this is in the context of this, what we are doing here. We didn't put it as defined, but using the terms, and it's not ideal term, but everybody, every document, every draft RFC is using that term in IETF, so I don't know if anyone knows some better definition. I also want to say that you in your terminology document mentioning the service 9 times. So I know that you decided not to define it there, but there is a 4 times mention of network service, 1 time connectivity service, and 4 times, not 1 time, 4 times, sorry, the service in general. So we can revisit if it should go back to the terminology or stay in this document.
Olga?
Yeah.
One question. So I was trying to update the text for the use cases, right? And there is on the left-hand side 2 use cases: service, subservice resource, and resource, subservice service. Now there is some content in there, but I'm not sure who added those 2 use cases and who could be adding, what we try to achieve with those 2, like the use case for that.
Yeah,
Because
I
in
have a
all,
question around it. Yeah, but in the list of use cases, I have a question around that exactly. I added the contact more from the API perspective, but my comment about business use cases that this is really what's needed for many other business use cases. So we can talk when I have it in the table, one of the issues for the use case.
okay, so I'll discuss at that point then.
Excellent, thanks. So Adrian, do you think this is this addresses your issue, or would you like to move the service to terminology?
I would not like to move the definition of service to the terminology, mainly for the reason you quoted about TMF, and I would gladly not spend 2 years debating. I think that it's fine for you to scope your definitions to your document. And I haven't looked at the detail of your proposed definitions, but I'm sure they are well over 90% correct. So we'd be just fiddling with words. So in short, yeah, thank you for doing the work on definitions, and keep them in your document.
Yeah, I'm happy as long as it doesn't end up with 6 months of discussions, But okay, thanks, Adrian.
Yeah,
Any
I
other
have just one
comment?
comment I just one comment on this one, Olga. Is that do we really need to have, I would say, the concept of subservice here? Because if you what you have there is exactly falling under the resource from the terminology draft, and maybe it's just simple that we keep the, I would say, the service and then reason about the resources. We don't need to have the, I would say, the composite layering of resources that will be consumed by the service. That's also can be also one direction to, I would say, to simplify the discussion and move forward.
Yeah. And maybe for us who are coming from the TMF and decades of looking at those layers, yeah, resource as we defined it, maybe assembly of the system, but then a component of the system. But then we said the system is something that is, I don't know, composition of. For me, it's still there is a kind of that thinking about the resource that is something that is not managed end to end in the context of, and subservice can be based on the same as well, but same defined it in the context of assuring and not overall management. But if you are thinking about this sub-service, it's more like resource-facing service in the TMF. and then resource becomes really something that is on the device. So it's not aligned, I understand, but you have to say it's not that you are going from a service to resource, but you are going from the hierarchy from the service to the resource, which is the assembly of
Yeah,
interfaces.
yeah,
Is the resource
for the,
network wide? Is the resource, can the resource be VPN, or is the resource just device and interfaces? You know, it's been the discussion, and where the service starts and where the resource stops, and where the sub-service starts and resource facing. So you are right. But then I will change those use cases and ensure that we are not mentioning the sub-service. Okay.
yeah, and just I would say my main comment here is that we just need to be consistent with the definition of the resources we have already in our NMOP document, and then not to create, I would say, a lot of noises for the document of progress for something that we can get a write of. So that's my, I would say, to be direct in terms of the of my comment. Anyway, so
Okay.
Benoit.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, I was comparing the subservice definition from SANE, from the RFC 9417, and the one that we have here. And Olga, you basically mentioned my point. The only difference is one is telling I'm going to assure subservice, and the other one is that I'm going to manage it.
Exactly.
So it was not clear to me if it was in sync or not.
I think it is fully in sync, and I used your definition, but just changed the shared to managed. Okay, so Med's suggestion is to remove the sub-service, but in that case, we have to be sure in all the document that we are not mentioning it. I still think there is value there in a way, but okay, maybe we were coming more from assurance perspective where we use that. And then maybe resource could be considered to be, you know, higher level resources, sub-service or device resources. Okay, thanks. So this is the list of the use cases and the current status. I split here, in the table, do we have business part or API part? Here we have, if they are new. Sorry, there is one missing for new, but and then mailing list discussions, which one are going ahead. So for inventory, there is a change in name, and I think it's better inventory queries from generic. Thanks, Bena. And there was a lot of content added for business content. So I think for this one, we have enough information. So if there are any more review comments, that's great. But I think it has a lot of information now. Service placement feasibility checks. There was a little bit. There was some description added as well, but there were no reviews yet. So maybe we need a little bit more discussion to be sure, or content. So for these one, I'm saying, do we need business use case for this? Is this a business use case really? As this may be required for multiple business use cases. It was initially added there, but it's really, we can, depending, what inventory queries are. If you are talking about inventory as something that is both logical and physical, then we could talk about browsing from service to resource and resource to service during some kind of logical inventory. But yeah, this is like more topological queries. So I'm not sure about these two, whether they are really business use cases as the others. They were added based on the operator request and asking us, we want to be able to browse up and down and down and up, topologically. And that was also during some of the SANE discussions. So what would be your recommendation, Benoit?
On what exactly? Because actually you went all over the place there and I lost track of what you're asking.
These are not really business use cases, so do we need to keep them because they are really required in many other business use cases, or do we
Which one?
leave them? Service, sub-service, resource, the two one that you were mentioning before.
Oh, okay.
that there is no business use case, but I'm saying, is this use case really? Because this is required for multiple business use cases.
But there is no business use case. Well, this is the same architecture, so there is value there. The question is there any specific requirements for CMAP here, right? Or they're covered by something else?
But we can put them inside intent service assurance as a
This one would make
specific,
sense
yeah.
because we explain in the intent what we need to do. And
Mm.
then a sub-part of this is a navigation from service, subservice to resource and vice versa.
Yeah.
So this is like a subset of the higher use case, which is like intent and service assurance. This one would make sense.
Yeah, but it couldn't be just service assurance. You would need to do it during postmortem. You would need to do it potentially during capacity planning to go up and down to see where the things are. So, there is a wider applicability, I think, of these things.
This is right. This is the intent part. And the intent could
Mm.
be for service assurance. It could be for capacity planning. It could be for simulation. It could be for anything. So what I observe while doing the use cases between, sorry, the justification for all these sections is that they're linked. All of them are linked together, right? The network digital twin, this could be part of the simulation as another example. The question that I'm always asking is there any specific requirement that we have for our document for CMAP?
But
And
you may have, there may be some queries in terms of show me all resources for service or show me all services using this resource, for example.
right. So anyway, to answer your question, I believe that service, subservice, resource, and the reverse could be part of the intent and service assurance.
Okay.
Now I see that Oscar is in the queue.
Okay. Hi, Oscar.
Oscar, we cannot hear you.
Hi, Oscar. Can you? We can't hear you. Okay, maybe there is some issue with microphone. Should I continue?
Yeah, just one comment on this one before we I would say move it on the decomposition into two ways. So yeah, I fully agree with Benoit. This is something that can be used by, I would say, various use cases there, including the service assurance. But one, I would say, key use cases that are currently in use in, I would say, in the operators. This is what we call the service impact analysis. So this kind of dependencies in both ways. This is something which is really important. But again, we don't need to be comprehensive in having all the use cases here in the document. What we really need is that having 13, I would say, use cases is already matched and huge. What we really need to do some prioritization and focus on those that have unique requirement or that we think that will be modifying the design of the solution. So I would personally remove or at least merge these two or include them in the other ones, but we don't need to be comprehensive here, Olga.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
So if Oscar, I don't know if Oscar, if I will just remove him from the queue right now, and then we can move on.
Thanks, Matt. So the next use case, intent service assurance, there was a lot of business content, and thanks, Bernard, that was added for this one. For the end-to-end and per-link KPIs and CMAP, there is no change. It's just a API part that was there. For capacity planning, there was a use case description added, and discussion is ongoing on the mailing list. Thanks, Benoit. And network design, there was initial business use case only added. Thanks, Sheriff. And discussion is on the mailing list going about the scope, it doesn't include active and passive, and if the use case name should change, so there will be continuation and then additional, so the API aspects for the use case. So thanks, Sheriff. For network simulation and network emulation, it was originally a simulation, so we added emulation, and this one is I think thanks Pierre and Vivek, and added business use case description. So I think what we need also is some kind of information what APIs are needed for this one. I didn't see that part, maybe I missed it. So then there was 3 others that were added. 2 of them are traffic engineering. We lost it through time, through some merges it was there, but in the last revision it wasn't, so it was added. And the use case description and post-mortem replay. Oh, sorry, for the network simulation it was Oscar, sorry, and post-mortem replay was Vivek and Pierre. I mixed them, sorry for that. And those were added, and there is some maybe parts that are missing around API usage. Closed loop is added, and for network digital twin there is no change. So
Yeah, Oscar is back. So Oscar, if you can,
can you hear me now? I had to join with the mobile. Now I hope it works.
Yeah, it works.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So I was just commenting that for the network digital twin, we had some conversations on the list that let's say that the term what might not be just say clear enough. It's more an IETF research initiative with a lot of meanings. So it was better to remove it, okay, the network digital twin, and we can have the use cases that the digital twin is trying to cover some use cases by means of emulation or simulation, and instead we can just leave the simulation and emulation and maybe have the differentiation. They are just explaining and not referred to network digital twin per se. Okay, so because in this, I think we can avoid also the controversy of the digital twin and leave the emulation there. And also the other comment was for you when you asked before about the service of service, etc. So yes, I agree that the use the use cases are either mainly I would say the service assurance. I think that is really a use case, but there are other use cases related that require this service to service resource. For example, there's some consistency checks. Okay, so for example, that checking that your network is according to your design. For example, that you have the correct services in place, etc. So there are some. So I would focus on the use case per se and not the associations. Okay, so I would try to remove those from there. And also traffic engineering per se is. I wouldn't really say it's a use case, okay, but I would say there are traffic engineering use cases, okay, that can be benefited from CMAP, okay, but so I would try if you want, I can add some of these traffic engineering use cases, okay, but not the traffic engineering per se, okay. I think the traffic engineering is more a set of techniques, okay, rather than a use case. But that just were the comments. Thank you.
okay.
So, Oscar, I was trying to take notes, and since I've been trying to improve the use case subsection, I'm not sure what your conclusions are. You mentioned service of service resource and vice versa. The main use case is assurance, you said, but also
Yes,
consistent check.
Consistency check. Yes, also consistency
right,
check.
But practically, do you agree to move these under the intent and service assurance and focusing on the intent part, like the consistency check, as opposed to assurance?
Yeah.
What do you suggest practically?
Move them in that they are not a use case. Move them inside the inside as maybe as requirements. So if an intent, you can decompose. Okay, you have an intent of a service that can be decomposed into services and that uses resources. Okay, that for the intent part, I would think it's it's good, is good enough. And there we can say, okay, the consistency, what the consistency check would mean, and what the service assurance would mean, okay, because they are two different. Let's say they are related, but in service assurance, I understand that you are taking corrective actions when you detect some KPI that goes wrong, whether the other is more a periodic check that you are doing on a service or that is all aligned with what you want to be. Okay.
Perfect.
But
Can you help with the text there? Because
okay,
actually
yeah,
there is like a distinction between the intent and the assurance, right? Because the service assurance is like, I check my intent and I take corrective action. And you're
yes, it's a
fully right,
corrective.
but I'm not sure how to modify the text here.
Okay, I can try to give a step, or maybe I can add the consistency check in addition to the assurance.
Sure, that's okay. I see that would work. Yes, and also on the TE, I'm not sure what you practically suggest. You mentioned it's not
To
a use
have
case, but a set of
to have
techniques.
traffic engineering use cases, not traffic engineering per se as a use case. There will be traffic engineering use cases, so it's not that traffic engineering is not a use case per se; it's a technique. Okay, so
Right.
this
So
is why.
in terms of editing the document, what does it imply? That you want to remove it? You're going to put it part of what? Of
No. That I
simulation
want to put,
or?
or no, that I want to put specific traffic engineering use cases. Okay, this is not that I want to remove traffic engineering per se. Okay, that I want to.
Yeah.
That is the because here is you say is a technique and so on. Okay, so here the T is not a use case. Okay, so it's, what I would say is have a specific traffic engineering use cases here. Okay, traffic engineering is just a technique. Okay, as you mentioned here. So that my proposal is to have more concrete use cases. Okay, not just.
But we do not have
And
provisioning use case in any case.
No. We have, okay, this is, but we might have several traffic engineering use cases that might go back to the previous one. That might,
Yeah.
uh,
No, we should add it. Yeah, thanks.
but that also I can provide some more text if you want, Benoit, for the traffic engineering use cases. Okay.
yeah, and by the way, if I'm not mistaken, the traffic engineering is already mentioned in the network simulation and emulation part.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's I think it makes sense, I would say, to try to consolidate what is really key use case, and I would say the building block to achieve that one, or the specific what if scenarios that will be I would say run and executed in the various cases there. Yeah, so let's just get that one on the mailing list before we make a decision on that one, Olga,
Okay,
please.
because what would make, let's say, if because partially you have it in the capacity planning, is where, let's say, you are already hinting that you need to place the traffic where it goes. So what is that? Traffic engineering. Okay, so in the end you are somehow hindering it in the capacity planning. Okay, so just to avoid duplication.
Exactly, and yeah, exactly. And if you adopt that, I would say that approach, this should also apply for the closed loop use case for itself, because it's the same. This is not a use case for its own. It's providing something for another more business use case itself. So yeah, we need to to have some consistency in the way we are defining the use cases and avoid, I would say, having these individual ones. I have just one
Perfect.
clarification question for you, Oscar, because you also mentioned that you wanted to remove the digital twin use case.
Yes.
I'm not sure to understand, I would say, the controversy there, because now
The
there's a reference, and people in the various, I would say, is they are using the current IETF documents as a reference document for the digital twin.
if you
And
are happy with
for
that,
example, please, I would just finish the comment, and then you can comment, Oscar, please.
yes.
The point of having, I would say, this section on this document is that this really is exposing that the CMAP can be used for this kind of initiatives. For example, we had recently meeting with ION people who are working on digital twin and so on, and they are really interested on this work. So that sometimes it's for convenience, but I don't think there's a controversy on the current IETF document itself. So if you just can clarify the concern you are having there, Oscar.
Because when I started, or when we started with the document, we received a lot of comments that that as the digital twin was still not clear, and it was more research that we could not do a standard based on that. That was the comment that I received, and this is why we said, okay, we don't put the focus on there. So that is extracting, claiming that we are doing the standard for the digital twin might be too much. Okay, so pointing to, okay, here people, this is what they're saying, and this can be useful and so on. That can be okay, but not to mislead that this is the source of the digital twin. This is what people is wanting to really to have. Okay.
Yeah, that's one is really fair, and we need to be careful on the wording we're putting there. But if the discussion we had at the time when people complained about, I would say, the digital twin is because the document was starting straightforward from the introduction to talk about digital twin and then to go to digital map. But the discussion I remember, for example, we had with Joel Halpern and so on, is that no one disagreed that the CMAP, that digital twin can be like one of the consumers of the CMAP. Wording that way, I don't see any, I would say, any controversy there, at least in the discussion we had at the time. But anyway, yeah, let's avoid having any confusion there. If you think that there is one, we need to clear it.
Okay, now then with the wording, if you can put the correct wording, I will be more than happy. Okay, and also pointing to the correct reference and so on. I think it's fair enough. Okay, mate.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. Yes, Thomas.
Yeah, just wanted to raise the question on the use cases for inventory queries and also capacity planning and network device. So if I'm reading into inventory queries, I think one of the objectives is to establish the relationship to the physical network. But I would suggest more focusing on what actually, and you were discussing that here now before, what's the use case, what's the benefit, or what's the driver behind it. And I would maybe go more in a direction like maybe network design and inventory queries to maybe go into physical or logical network planning. And then like capacity management could be like one of the application or reasons or the outcome when you know basically how physically the network is being organized, then the capacity can be also arranged or planned or monitored accordingly. So I would go towards maybe instead of inventory queries and network design, go into physical and logical network planning as use cases.
If I can, so I spent some time trying to improve the text about the use cases. And actually, we could be going in almost any directions because the CMAP is going to be the center of many things. Okay, we could debate whether this is inventory or CMAP, doesn't matter to me. The point is that having the concept that we are going to define here, network, termination point, links, devices, are going to be the center of many things. Now, while I was writing those sections, in the end, I could go and expand the text forever and have more and more use cases. The only thing that counted was the last paragraph of the subsections, which is telling the application, the user will be able to blah, blah, blah on the APIs, so that we could deduce the requirements. So maybe I would propose that this is what we should focus on. Is there anything that is going to have new requirements for the concept that we want to model here?
Okay.
Yeah, Olga, please, if you can just wrap
Yeah.
up in 5 minutes as we
Okay.
will
Thanks.
at the end of.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I would agree with Benoit about it because it is kind of difficult to come up with the ideal situation in terms of use case. Thanks. So the next one is I'm just saying here that the gaps that we identified previously they were added here in some text around them to the requirements. So this is for bidirectional, multi-point, multi-domain, subnetwork, shared, supporting, and then the last one is about Oscar's requirement for the links that are down and nodes that are down that they have to appear on the topology, and for the ones the status how it is implemented, it can be either in CMAP or accessible from the CMAP. So this is what Oscar will be discussing, but the requirement has been added. There was also discussion around mailing list about differentiating between live network snapshots, potential network, and there is a proposal from Oscar about how we about the terminology for live network, snapshot, and potential network. So I'm proposing to add these three requirements if we agree, but it's not been added yet. So it would be great to get feedback. Do we need a requirement per type of the API, in fact, that, instance that we have to access, that CMAP must be enabled to do retrieval from live and snapshot, and then for the potential to be able to do both retrieval and write access. So this would be the requirements that are coming, but of course we need to be driven by use cases. Any comments? So maybe we can continue this. I'll add those requirements. Is it okay? And we can continue on the mailing list. Oscar, are you okay with adding these requirements?
Yep.
I will add. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and now the other this requirement, yes, and then the other one we'll see now whether we add it or not.
Okay. Okay.
And, yeah. And also the terminology. I think this. I don't know if you want to in this one of the on the leaf network, on the snapshot, and so on. I don't know if we need some also input from the team here, if for the snapshot part or leaf network.
Yeah. And you're sure that you prefer potential new network than planned network?
Yes, because I mean it's also it may be something planned or something that you have only do for testing. I don't know, but here we can discuss that. I mean that's open to really to suggestions and refinements in the terms. Okay, so here we have also the terminology fairy with us. So also help there in the term is good. Here just propose these ones: the snapshot, leaf network, and potential new network. But here open to suggestions here for the floor. This is why I say if anyone else, and especially terminology fairy guy, has some what do you think about these suggestions or these namings is appreciated.
Okay. Thanks. So I'll go quickly. So this is the new draft version that is submitted. All the things mentioned, plus some clarification for Siemens Drive use case and editorial comments. There is also some changes, as we mentioned, that Med and Benoit did and that haven't got into version 01. And I also didn't add all contributors, so we will have version 02 submitted after the meeting today. And the next step is, of course, continuation of the discussion, closing all issues, use cases, releasing new version before IETF 122, and then start looking at hackathon. So thank you. This is all from me.
Yeah, thank you, Olga, for sharing this update and for leading the discussions. Just one comment about the new requirements. Please don't add them directly into the document, but trigger the discussion on the mailing list before we agree on the ones to whether to include them in the document or not.
Okay, thanks.
Now, this is for Oscar. So you have the control, Oscar.
Yeah, okay, perfect. It works with the phone because I cannot make it work with my PC. So I'm with the phone and I try to read this big, okay, with the screen. Perfect. Okay, so I think I can be quicker than the 15 minutes and we'll spend more time in discussion so we have more time for here. So here just first of all clarify where this comes from. Okay, so this comes from the use cases. Okay, here our use cases is that we want to make at some point in time we want to make the capacity planning. Even it can be for the next year, for the next month, or even we can do a simulation of what is going to happen in the network in the next in the next day or in the next days. Okay, so here what do we need? Okay, so for one case, what we need is when we are going to do the capacity planning for the network and for the next year is a stable photo of what we have. Okay, so what we don't things can we know that can or the here we focus on links, but this can also apply to services. It can be applied to other things. So here we can have at some point in time a link or a node in maintenance. Okay, we do have our maintenance windows. We do software upgrades. We put things down, etc. So this is something normal, and that goes back to life at a certain point in time. And sometimes, on the contrary, there are some event that happens, and then the link or the node or the service is down because of misconfiguration or a failure or a fire or something. Okay, so here what I would like is to be able to distinguish the two of them. Okay, because when you send that information, if we are when doing the for example you take this snapshot and you want to make the photo of and you want to do the planning, you might do it wrong. Okay, because you think something is not there, so the conclusions will be wrong. While on the other hand, if what you are trying to do is, okay, I am going to survive in the next hours, yes, you need to take into account that the node is down on purpose. Okay, so here the proposal is that when we send this on UCMap to feed this tool, the simulation tool, emulation or planning, etc., or even the postmortem case. Okay, so you want to replay, I would like that the model, okay, that you indicate whether it is in maintenance. Okay, this element is out because you want it to be down, or it is down because but everything is configured. Okay, so the configuration is all there. It's all supposed to be there, but the service or the link in this case is not available. So the only issue, the issue that we have today is that the base IETF topology model does not contain the status. So here, either you have a node or you don't have it. You have a link or you don't have it. In the T topology, yes. Okay. In the T topology we added that status. Okay, just because the reason that it was not in the topology, in the base topology one. So here, in this case, you could have the link down, but still appear in the topology. So I think it's better than taking nodes in and out. So here the question that is open to the floor, okay, is do you think this is something that is part of the base topology itself, or it is more let's say something that an augmentation that is specific for 40 or it is a, let's say, a status that is applicable to everything. Okay, also to remember that in services we needed to also to every service that we have created, and here some of you we have worked together in defining services and so on. We had also to redefine the status again. Okay, so if it's administrative down, if it's yeah, so we had to redefine everything every time the status. Okay, so here this is the question and open to the floor, and so I would like to have feedback if you have now. Otherwise, yes. Someone was joining the queue. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to talk for half an hour about that in the next presentation, actually, because depending on what you're trying to get, you will have to decide whether you're augmenting or whether you provide a reference to how to get that external information, depending on your use case. So there is not for your case of state of links, it's going to depend what is the exercise you're doing and what is the model that you need and at which layer you are. And so I think that one should stay open on whether to augment and provide this information within the model itself, or to point external or to give the means to resolve external references in order to get that information, depending on the requirements that you have. If you have to stay in sync all the time, or if you're doing what if analysis and you have to get one snapshot at a given time, it will depend. And I think one should stay open to one solution or the other.
Just 2 comments from my side. So it depends. I think the state depends on the layer. It can be in one layer, it can be up, while in an upper layer it being down, because still some configuration of state items are missing. So it cannot be, that decision cannot be made globally. And I suggest to keep planned into a separate topology. So there are 2 different things. So one is you're planning a topology, while the other one is the current active topology. And also, as Pierre mentioned, I think in his presentations, we will see more on like replay capabilities, where this becomes relevant as well.
I also think that there are some complications in regards to the layered approach. So, because the different layers status may mean different things, and we already have that status not just in TE, but we have in VPN drafts, and we have ACs and SAP has status up, down, unknown, and then we have an IETF interfaces, different status. So unless we want to introduce some, status in terms of specifically to CMAP, I think it would be very difficult at this stage to have a unified status for all layers, and there is a complication about then maintaining that status in the CMAP type of controller, which will then have to get information from all the other functional modules. So I do believe that there may be kind of complications in terms of layering if you do it. If you are doing it from the beginning without other drafts, maybe we could have kind of considered like in some other models which have common parts to have it somewhere in single place. But at this stage, I'm not sure if it's possible.
So my question is, what type of status you see for nodes and links, right? Is it only present or not? Because actually it's going to become like complex very quickly. So as Thomas was mentioning, the status depends on the layer. We try to get a status for services or sub-services, and then actually we give up to standardize this, because it's not only up and down, it's like, oh, staging or dormant or partially up, and then it depends on which topology you have, hub and spoke, right? It depends which one is down. So you could have the entire service down or just a part of it, like fully meshed, and you got one edge which is down. Is the entire service up, down? So actually, my point is that if it's only for the key concept in this CMAP document, it might make sense. But then you mentioned noded link. What about TP? What about network? Right, so this is what I would start. What do you want to have as status for node link? If it's present or not, or more than this? And then maybe that's a connection with your snapshots, right? And simulation or not, everything. So sorry, many open questions there.
Yeah, I agree, Benoit, that there are many open questions, and at least, I mean, there are, or in my particular view, there is one that is very simple to begin with. It was like at least the up and down, if they appear or if the object appears or disappears from from the structure. Okay, that's the more basic one, and from there we can start, because you can, as you say, you can have plan, you have a stage, even you have a temporary out because I want is in maintenance or degraded. That is debatable. But for me, the very first one is whether the object appears and disappears from the structure. Okay, that is the basic one that I see. Okay, so if you want it, you call me. There's 2 minutes left.
Sorry, I was like this Sharif. I was more into, yeah, I agree with Pierre and Thomas. Once I think we start to put the status, now it will open more questions. How to, that's the status, basically the comment mentioned from Thomas. The status is in one layer, doesn't mean necessarily the same status in the augmented layer, etc. And the other part will be, now we are introducing new state, but then it might be in the past, might be in the future, might be in another dimension, time frames. So my suggestion is, for a specific use case, like maybe for, if we are doing capacity planning, maybe we don't look at the base one, maybe we look at the network design, which will exclude, let's say, the status, and then we can build on top of this one. So let's say we have the design, or the intended, like what should be the design of or interconnect of the network, which, let's say, exclude the status, and then we can build on top of this. If we need something that has the specifically status, or what's the status now for the layer 2, then we can have layer 2 and build on top of this, like having the status. So, for a specific purpose, and instead of having this in the base and then introducing another problem, how to manage this across different layers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. I think we can continue discussions online. Just that I opened there are these 2 open issues added in the GitHub, so I think it's a good place also to comment, and also on the list. Okay, so just please take a look at them. So I think here's the time is over. I think the purpose of today's discussion was, I think, is fulfilled. So Mel, I think you can continue with the next slot.
Thank you, thank you, Oscar. And also, yeah, please don't forget the mailing list for discussions again. So. So the next one will be Pierre, if I'm not mistaken. Yep.
So actually, Oscar gave a very good introduction to my talk. So here, so I'm Pierre-François. So here I'm going to talk about linking topology to external elements, driven by the use cases, evolving use cases and requirements that we are discussing. By topology, I mean 8345 and Childs. And the main takeaway actually is that we will not be able to do everything in Yang. We will need to point to external information from within it or not. And I would like to discuss this with you today. So the context of this is we're funded by Huawei to do R&D on in order to be able to showcase the use of CMAP on an SRv6 enabled network. So we want to be able to use CMAP for the objective of meeting the goals of SANE, because at the end of the day, that's all what we care about. Possibly including elements of network anomaly of the network anomaly architecture that we're working with Thomas, based on modeling, simulation, and actual network monitoring. All of this focused on services that are transported with SRv6. So I will talk briefly about the use cases driving the project and how we think they will require to provide links from the topology to external elements. And then I will discuss about how we plan to achieve that, and then ask some questions for you. So on the use cases, we are debating a lot, and the list of use cases is actually quite long. So what we do is we pick some of them, we discuss with operators, and we try to think on how we would actually achieve this by doing as little R as possible and the largest amount of development needed to solve the case. When with Vivek we think about the use cases, we think about mostly 3 families of them. All of them belong to 3 families of use cases. State, what is the network looking like right now in order to understand what's going on in my network? What if is what would my network look if something X would happen in my network? And then something has happened in my network and I'm trying to understand what has happened. So doing historical analysis in order to be able to correlate events that occurred in my network in order to, at the end of the day, do root cause analysis in order to fix my network or my architecture. So for state, we've been discussing it. CMAP can obviously be used as a way to gather inventories, configs, KPIs, service assurance that are related to one service. And so CMAP can be used as the central point to basically understand the status of our network right now. For example, if we go deep down, I would need, as Oscar said, I would need to be able to know what is the state of my links at different layers and what are those different states. I would want to know if all the interfaces in the domain are up, and so I can consider that my network is up and running, whatever it means. Or I would need to know if my KPI for a service are within target. Right? However, when we think, we know that the inventory and the set of states are a huge amount of data and that we cannot track everything in a single CMAP, so we're never going to scale. And keeping this all up to date within an external model is also something that is very challenging. And so we think that sometimes you cannot put it all there in Yang, and what you need to provide is a means to access to document or formalize how to access to this the source of truth for this whole bunch of information. On a what if?
So Pierre,
go ahead, Benoit. Yeah.
Oscar, are you in the queue? And Pierre, do you want questions in between, or?
Oh yeah, sure. I want to be interrupted as soon as something pops in your head. Yeah.
So Oscar, we don't know if you're on. Okay, good. Thanks.
So now for what if scenarios. So I'm thinking network design, closed loop operations, or service placement feasibility check there. There we are trying to exercise a model of the network and ask ourselves what would happen if something is happening. So with Vivek, the main scenario we have for that is to detect what I call the Renault SRv6 policies. So a Renault segment routing policy is a policy that works extremely well, that is very nice when everything is fine in the network. But once something goes wrong, it's chaos, and the policy places your traffic on crazy paths, completely spaghetti. And so with a potential risk to service assurance. And so the idea there is to gather the network, make a snapshot of it, model it, and ask ourselves, okay, if this node fails, what would be the service assurance that I would have for a given service that is transported over a policy that is impacted by a node failing on the path? And as a result to that, we could close the loop, so provide alternative choices for the optimization of that policy, so what the path over which that policy is establishing the transport, or anticipate for the failure and keep in mind that once we have that failure happening in the network, we have to plan ahead and be able to reconfigure that policy ASAP in order to not have this spaghetti path going on through the network. In order to do that, we need to have a tractable way, scaling way of gathering all the necessary items to run the what if. But there are many what ifs. There are many different CMAPs that need to be used in order to answer a given question. And so actually a CMAP is not a CMAP, it's a bunch of CMAPs that are designed in a certain way in order to answer a specific question. And so for each of our what if use cases, we lead to the design of different layers, levels of abstraction, but still we need a central way to define and obtain information from the outside. So from the outside, from the network, from an historical database, or from another CMAP. And so we need to be able to define this in a centralized fashion in order to be able to get that information. So the last use case is what we called replay postmortem root cause analysis. They're a bit mingled, and they're motivated by an exercise that we do with Thomas when something impacting a service goes wrong within the Swisscom network. And so basically, we work around the behavior of a service disruption detection mechanism that has been deployed within Swisscom. And the objective is to see if we do the job right by automating service disruption detection. And so basically, when the system detecting service disruption raises a flag, all the data on which it bases the service disruption detection is stored. And the engineers start to dig to understand why the issue was happening, why the flags have been raised, with their own understanding of how the network behaves. And so biased by their observation, their networking knowledge, etc., we start digging into configuration counters, the database containing all the changes in the routing that has been observed in order to understand the anomaly, to, at the end of the day, either fix the network or fine-tune the service disruption detection mechanism. And so currently we have ongoing steps to standardize the flags that we are providing from the service detection mechanism itself. But the understanding of the network behavior could be made much more easy with the use of a CMAP. And so from the experiences of the last 3-4 years with Thomas, we see that we have to deal with a huge amount of data. The number of layers and point of views that we have when looking at the data is very different, and it's a high skill work. And so we would like to use CMAP to rescue there. And so the idea would be to model the state of the network based on all the data that we have ingested with time. And so now all what we have thought about with our what ifs and with our status of the network is becoming an evolution over time of all that data. And so we need timed network events, timed metrics, and timed for everything in order to be able to reproduce the evolution of the state of the network over time and be able to observe and explain with automated tools what has happened in the base model to finally find the root cause of the problem. So in order to do this, one CMAP instance containing everything is not going to be easy. So I will need for some actions to be able to find, for example, I see that maybe it's my IGP convergence that was an issue, and so I need to reclaim all the timers for all my routers to see how they do flooding, SPF scheduling, what is their TI-LFA behavior, etc. And so what we would like to have is a an organized, maybe standard, I don't know yet, way to relate to this externalized information from within the CMAP. And so depending on what needs to be observed, I will need to create different CMAPs from which I will need to be able to retrieve that external information to do the job. And so it's a bit of a pain point that we have on our project is it's to organize all of this, the linking from 8345 and childs to the external elements that we need in order to do our job at the end of the day. Well, I'm not going to explain to you what 8345 does. We have three ways of doing that. The easy job is to not do the job. And so what we would do is not do anything and keep on augmenting. Another approach that we are investigating is to not augment 8345 and child with the data that we need to do the job, but to augment it with external references with a structured data that allows us to know where we have to get that data. And we have a second approach where we externalize all of this and we provide the mappings between 8345 and our external data in a separate database, in a completely separate model. So we can keep on augmenting. That would make my life easier because it would remove this action item from our list. And I know we could make this work by doing more yang, and extending even more with all the information that we need for all the use cases. And that will work in a lab, but we are afraid it will never scale. Keeping it in sync in a lab may be possible, but keeping it in sync in a production network is never going to fly. And so we know we are not going to be able to do this and validate at the end of the project. So the approach that we were initially thinking, because it's the intuitive approach, it's the intuitive way, is to say, well, I need this information. I'm going to augment this my model with an information that allows me to know where I have to get that external data. So if I augment 8345 and kids, what I could do is to start deciding this information is related to which layer and decide to augment, well, either always augment 8345 nodes or augment one of their refinements or instances of say, for example, IETF for Oscar L3 ISIS topology, and decide to augment it there with the external references to where I'm going. So if I augment on top, well, I can. The idea is that I can link to external information where it is needed, and but the cons for this is that it can get a bit messy because I have to decide at which layer. You see, we've had that discussion just on the talk before by Oscar, deciding at which layer we model where to get information about the state is already a project in itself. And so if we are too high, it becomes unclear and we have everything everywhere and it gets messy. And if we are too low, we need to track everywhere in all this huge model where is what, and we may lose generality because those external information may be actually useful for some cousins of those branches in the tree. Another approach that we follow is to have a completely external database giving us this mapping. So in the database, we have an ID of a network element, so an 8345 element, the type of information that we are referring to, and that gives us a description of the query that we have to make in order to retrieve that external information. So by doing that, it's nice because we scale the CMAP. It's not impacted. The problem is that we have it's a bit difficult to refer to the CMAP family of, well, the 8345 family of models from the outside, because all the identifications are inherited when you augment 8345. And so in our database, we have to define if we want to have a fine-grained references to our network elements. As the IDs are inherited, what we have to map is a network element ID, the type of information that we are looking at, and at which layer we have to go. And from these this triplet, we can finally figure out how to obtain the external information. Another cons for this approach is it's one more lookup. You see, I mean, it's velocity. So when I'm going to explore my CMAP, I would, if it's within the model, I already know how to execute my query to get the information and I will get it. If I do this database mapping, well, I'm exploring my CMAP, then I ask myself, okay, I need to get that external information for this node. Then I have to go to my database in order to retrieve the mapping and then go back to my modeling with the result in order to do my job. And so it might be a bit cumbersome and time consuming to do this, this completely externalized mapping from model to external information. So we to be honest, we discarded approach 0. We think we need to provide external information to data. Also, there are things we will not be able to do in Yang. And so the only thing we can do in Yang is to point to what to do not using Yang. And currently what we do is that in our labs, we develop both approaches. So extending models to provide means to link to external information and provide and have an external database that is providing this mapping in an independent fashion. So one thing we quickly realized when we were configuring those external references is that it's always the same, actually, right? So in many cases, the approach to obtain an external information about one network element is the same for all nodes in the network. For example, if I have a full Huawei network and I need to recover the timer configuration for ISIS for the nodes of that network, I'm going to always execute the same query on all my nodes of the network, and that's quite easy. Sometimes it's a little more if I have a bunch of Cisco routers within my network as well. Well, I may have 2 or 3 approaches to get that external information. One for my Huawei boxes and a couple for my Cisco boxes, actually. And so, but when we look at scale, well, we have a few sets of ways to get that external information when I'm tapping into the network for my entire network. And so what we came up with is a way of templating the description on how to get an information for a given node, for a given type of exercise that we do. And so we have a Yang model that describes in Yang how to get the information that you do not want to have put in the Yang itself in your model. And so what we do, we have a template that describes the type, that characterizes the type of information that you want to query. Then we have the parameters that you will have to provide in order to execute that query on a given node in a generic. And then we had a use case coming from operators that sometimes I have multiple ways to execute the query to get the same information. And so then we have a list of actual description on how to get to that information in your network, either through a netconf query or a restconf query, or going into for other information, going into the inventory with Thomas for postmortem, going into the database where he collects all the historical information of what happened in his network. And there in that query also, we have a bunch of parameters that we can add that are specific to the type of query that we have for that information. And so these templates, if we follow the approach 1, well, we configure them as extension to network elements in the model if in 8345 nodes. So we augment the nodes of the model with the different templates that allow us to retrieve additional information from the outside of the model itself. And in approach 2, we are just simply completely, it's still in Yang, but we're not touching, we are just referring to elements of the model from the outside, not augmenting anything from 8345 and childs. So now from this, I have 3 questions. We think it's going to be needed. We think we need to be organized in the way we do the references to retrieve external information, but I'm not sure if we need to standardize this. So currently, the status is we have mocked up networks and we do a CMAP implementation following approach 1 and approach 2 to validate that we can actually get the information. We're currently deploying in the lab. So the idea would be to demonstrate this at the next hackathon within the Swisscom lab itself. I'm eager, actually, if some people want to have us work in their own labs, I'm eager to broaden the scope of the environments where we are working. And my question to the working group is, do we think that we would need to standardize the way to describe the links from CMAP to external elements to solve the different use cases that we have? Are there? I'm raising the question now. I don't know if we have strong opinion on this.
Yes, Thomas, please.
Yes, so on that second question, do we keep it internal or is it we're tracking this within NMOP? I think it's great to make it openly accessible. You know, I think we should debate that and we should discuss openly about how this can be linked best. And I think once in the discussion, we see wherever there is merit behind, we can go down and start standardize it. And maybe just one comment on approach 1 versus approach 2. I also pasted in the chat. I think they are depending on basically how much information we need to map versus how quick the information needs to be queryable. So I think in approach 1, I think the aim should be to be more or less real time, while in approach 2, it's perfectly fine if a query on a map can take several minutes.
Completely agree with you. Depending on the use case, we end up preferring one or the other. So I'm afraid we will have to support both all the time. Exactly. One case for approach 1 as well is when the external reference is another CMAP. And so there it's a bit sad to have an external database. You see, I would want that to be completely captured by the model itself.
Exactly.
But I'm not sure it needs to be standardized. That's my question, because it's a pain point that we have to deal with it with Vivek, but is it internal work? And I would keep you guys updated on the problems that we had. Is it an implementation report or is it an informational draft telling you what we guys are doing in our labs? Or I'm not sure about this. If there is a need for standardizing this, I'm still not sure.
I would start with an informational document and go from there. You know, you can always later down the road, you can change it to standard track. If you know, in the discussion, in the feedback, we get the information. No, this would be great to have it standardized. At the moment, keep it informational.
Okay, point taken. Thanks. Benoit?
Okay, so you're asking obviously yourself the right questions. We don't do a CMAP for the sake of doing a CMAP, right? It's what are we doing with this CMAP? So you're asking yourself the right question. Approach 1 or approach 2. I believe that maybe some of the key relationship could be in the approach number 1. But we realize that we're going to reach quickly the limits of Yang.
Yeah.
Right. So the approach 2 is about the right one. Now it's funny that you define a Yang module to express what you're going to do in Yang.
Yeah, but that's I'm trying to make the link. Yeah.
No. I mean, yeah. This is joking apart. I mean, because it was a good joke. We know that we're reaching the limit of Yang and that we need to have another approach. Should we standardize this? I'm not even there yet. You need to prove with your code, with the hackathon, with everything, that it could be working. From there, whether it's done with this Yang module or a different way, it's we're going to see in the future.
Okay,
would
so
be
the plan
standardized. Please
go ahead. The plan would be next hackathon we showcase it, and then we think more. And yeah, maybe this would be required. Maybe I'm 1 year ahead. I'm not sure yet.
You are 1 head ahead. Okay. Exactly, because it's only whenever we could prove that CMAP works for what you want to do. SRv6 as one technology, we could have picked another one in the context of SANE. And to quickly use CMAP as a center of everything to quickly troubleshoot and do closed loop, then we will see if it's worth it to standardize it. But let's prove that CMAP does a good job.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the feedback, Ben. Yeah, so another question is those time templates.
Vivek is on the queue. I don't know if you want to.
Sure, go ahead, Vivek.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add something. Pierre, can you go back to slide 24, please? Yes, this one. What we call request here. Even if we define a young model, we are not just linking to just young. Request can be whatever I want. If I want to add some text that describe how I can get the information, I can just put this here. If I want to add SQL queries that describe how I can get this information, I can do this here also. Request here can be whatever I want, not just linked to young model. Even if example here are netconf and resconf based on young.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, one comment on the on your question, Pierre, from my side. Independent whether this will finish as an RFC or not, it is always good to have, I would say, public documentation of how you are doing this. I think this is worth at least to be sharing, and then we will decide in the future on the stuff. So yeah, please, if you have the energy and time to put it, this will be really useful for the community.
The goal would be to at least document it and provide open source code dealing with
please.
it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and this for this the second, I'm topping on the timing, right? Am I done with my timing?
If you can wrap up, I would say okay. 5 minutes.
So I skip question 2 because I know what's gonna happen if I ask it. Okay. So now my third question would be. So as I said that initially, the end goal is saying it's not we don't care about the map of our network. We want our network to work, and so the end goal is to go to SANE. And so I need to provide external references to, well, I don't know, 9418, trying to understand 9417, and I'm not quite sure what to define as a work here globally in the working group. I'm not quite sure where to start and how to link from what we are doing in CMAP to SANE itself. And so is there an action item somewhere in order to formalize this, to standardize this, or to give approaches? Because we have our own opinion on how we are going to do that with our own understanding of 9418. But I'm not quite sure if this is an item that is being worked on, or if everything, everyone, I have a feeling that everyone has their own idea of what's going on, but we say link to SANE, but we do not describe how or formalize, point to young models that would allow us to do that. And so I'm a bit at a loss here, to be honest with you, on how I'm going to achieve this part of the project. So it's easy to say on slide that we link to SANE when we're trying to actually define it through specification for development. We're scratching our head. So maybe this may need to be documented by I don't know who in this working group.
Yeah, just on specific on this one, Pierre. As you know, that document was produced by the OPSA working group. So yeah, please, if you identified, because this is really a question about the usability of the model and how I will integrate it in my own use cases and so on. So yeah, the first step I will do is go to the OPSA working group, keep the NMOP working group CC'd, and explain the problem there, and try to see if people agree with the problem. So we will try to fix it. Otherwise, we'll pass through. So yeah, please consider that a concrete action point, please.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. For my second question, I'm going to push it to the mailing list and discuss it offline with people and get back to you. I'm done. Thank you. And thanks for the feedback.
Thank you, Pierre. So the next is the passive inventory. So it's for you, Olga.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Matt. So I just wanted to share with you the kind of some communication that was on the mailing list and maybe the relevance of some things that are going on in Ivy in terms of how topology and how it's related to topology. So the question is probably how to reference between topology and inventory and where the topology is implemented. So there is a discussion that Pierre Vivek has with different approaches and things like that. The second is Ivy is proposing another approach in draft network inventory topology with augmenting RFC 345 and adding the references to Ivy. And then the passive inventory draft, which is for the passive inventory, fully models the topology of cables and segments inside the inventory. So there are discussions about how to navigate between topology and inventory in the Ivy, and if you need bidirectional references, or is it enough just to point from topology to inventory? So that's a high-level summary. So I see Mo, you are here, or not anymore. So this is kind of the so the Boer and Med and others have a proposal for how to connect to the inventory, to the physical inventory, but this is only for the active part by augmenting RFC 345 with references to network element and port components. For the link, because the link currently was not in the version of the inventory, active inventory, sorry, it was just name. And I consider this to be relation from topology to inventory. And this is the draft that's been worked on. And the next one is the one about passive inventory, where I involved with some comments. To me, it looks that passive inventory for connectivity aspect is fully implemented inside the passive inventory module. And I mentioned on the mailing list, there are three options. We do it only in the inventory model. We do it via topology model, so that they change the approach that they model it by using the approach that we agree for other, and then doing it via both, having topology in both inventory and then there was a question of operators. Do they believe that passive and active should be in CMAP and should have the same model? And Brad replied that he believes it should. And as a result of the Brad's reply, I added the requirement for passive topology inside the CMAP draft. So that was a little bit of history there. So this is the proposed model, and as you can see here, it is it does kind of have parts of it are really kind of topological relationships. So there is no cable added. In the cable, we do have references from both ends, and then in the optical cable, and then as part of it, we have a segments again, and then relationship between that cable and segment through the containment relationship. So the questions that I had is, do we need to model this in CMAP as well? And that there is a requirement that was added. Can it be modeled via supporting relation between links that correspond to cables and links that correspond to segments? Does it have to be modeled in both topology and inventory? Should we evaluate if connectivity for cables and segments should be modeled via topology links instead of doing it in the passive inventory module? So this was the discussion on the mailing list. So I don't know if you have any opinions about these questions here. Okay. So if not, like I found some differences between how
Maybe
they model.
just from my side, sorry, Olga.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Thomas.
I was not following the discussion on the mailing list, but what I'm curious about is, so first of all, I think from an operator perspective, having visibility to the passive topology, that will be very, very helpful. where I'm, let's say, my concerns are a little bit if we are doing that in the same topology map and for the active and the passive, but ever keep that separate would actually make it more simpler. So what's maybe your take on this?
To me, like I don't know. I'm better. I'm thinking in terms of what is the network and how the things are related and how the topology is. So if I'm thinking just not from the use case perspective, but from the modeling perspective, then passive is a kind of part of the overall network. So it is, we can have it as a separate layer, we can have it as a somehow separated, but not to have relationships in terms of, because there are relationships are here because you can have links that have one side which is active, another side that is passive, as you can see from this module.
I think as a separate layer, to me, it would make perfectly sense. But somehow keep it separate from the active current state, so that, because depending on use case, we are gonna need the passive or we don't need it. I think Pierre also mentioned before that basically at the end, having a lot of information present at the end had also a negative impact on the scaling.
Yeah. So I would see it as a part of the CMAP, but also, as a separate layer that would be there. And for those, as you remember, we did discuss in the past, different users may have visibility into some layers and other users may have visibility as operator on all layers. So it's a different issue who can access what, but in terms of the overall network topology, relationships are there, relationships are topological relationships. So I do see it as a part of CMAP as well.
Makes sense.
Oscar?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't know why now it works. Okay, so in our case in Telephonic, I guess it's the same as in other operators. We have our external fiber plant system, very detailed one, and when you want to use it in or when the kind of analysis that we do with the network, only use a very, let's say, a small subset of the information there. So for me, what I would like to have it is in CMAP, let's say, as simple as possible, and just pointer or linking to external. But that, I believe, would be more linked to the previous presentation, let's say, of how to have to be able to point to external references and to external sources and keep here, for example, the cabling. You can have, or I would say, have one layer that is the physical layer, have it one simple physical layer, and that you can point to the relevant inventory if required. Okay, but keep it simple inside CMAP.
Yeah. My thanks, Oscar. Like my proposal would be to have it as a link, between different devices, and then have the other links that are segments through relationship from that link, so that we do it in one layer with different types of links and relationships within them. One that would be a cable and another one that would be segment, like hops of the cable. Thanks. Danielle?
So I have very little to add to what Thomas and Oscar said. Well, the first thing is that if planning is one of the core use cases of CMAP, I would say that you definitely need also the passive part. It can be done at different layers, of course, yes. Also because there are use cases for which you might need it and cases for which you might not need it. So doing this split absolutely makes sense. all in all, the general rule said by Oscar, which is keep things as simple as possible, is always a good rule to follow.
And just to ask you, Danielle, do you think the approach of modeling it in both places, that connectivity aspect in both CMAP and in inventory, is required?
If strictly required, I don't know. For sure, nice to have. I would need to think a little bit more if that's strictly required. I don't know. I mean, being Med, one of the authors of the topology draft, I think his opinion is more valuable than mine here.
Yeah. We don't have the authors here from the passive inventory draft, I think, so we can continue on the mailing list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thomas.
Yeah, just a comment from for Daniele. So I think the passivity has more to do with the state, whether it is up or down on different layers, where the planning aspect is more about the time. So we had before Pierre explaining that after what-if scenario, basically planning into the future, the current state, or then the replay when you do historical analysis, in my opinion.
Yeah, but so just to see if I understood what you said. So you're saying that the passive inventory is not needed for planning. Did I get it right?
That's correct. So I think passivity has to do basically. It depends also on the layer. You're just for some layer this is relevant information, and for other layers it's not relevant. Where the planning is more about going time-wise into the future.
Mm. I'm not sure if I completely agree, but I mean I don't want to steal the time to the discussion on this.
Okay.
Just Daniele, on the specific point, do you think it's better to discuss this in the IV to have something which is really dedicated to this point or
a cross posting would be perfect.
Yeah, because I would really like to that the people who are authoring this are really aware of this work and avoid having decisions here in the NMOP that won't impact that work. So yeah, Olga, please keep posting both mailing lists on this point and try to make some progress on it.
Yeah.
Yes, Brad, please.
I was just going to say that from a planning aspect for us, it's extremely important because even out into the future, it becomes critical when you're covering 9.2 odd million square kilometres, right? Running fibre over large distances becomes extremely expensive, but it's also important for root cause analysis and narrowing down where a root cause is, especially from a cable cut aspect point of view, because it actually optimizes and reduces your cost and shortens your mean time to repair, right? So you can't just rely on the active network elements to get it in terms of saying it's a cable somewhere, because if you're running tapered cables, then it could be different cable segments, which is why the passive side of things has got those cable segments, right? But there's a lot of use for it in both, I suppose, a planning aspect point of view and analysis from an event side of things as well.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah. I fully, sorry to jump in, I fully agree what Brett said. I think passive is for many different use cases, also for planning, very useful.
Okay. So yeah, so this is thanks Thomas. So these are some differences that I found on the first side, but maybe it needs further analysis. Like the first is really that there is denormalization and that links are defined in two places. And one thing is to define cables, another thing is to define topology. So I think maybe there is a discussion to be done. Does it need to be in the inventory, and does inventory just contain the information about things, and then we move the connectivity part into the TP only, or if people prefer to have it in both places, that's another option. But I said I believe that the approach can be generalized and that we don't have to have it in both places, but that's candidate options. Then there is strong requirement for bidirectional, which we are adding in any case. And again, segments contained in the table. Well, we don't have a containment, so this is a new topological approach via containment and not via supporting relationship, because but this may be more appropriate for passive inventory use case. I'm not sure, so again, I'm thinking, could supporting be used for this? And these are some differences I found. Some suggestions for Ivy, but that's just my suggestions. So I don't know, Danielle, I did send it in the email to the group already. I don't see why we don't have a common module for active and passive devices and have completely different modeling of passive and active and IDs and everything. So for me, it's kind of puzzling why there is no some common aspect, and then you augment with specific properties. But that's not topology related. So
yeah. I have to say that from this for this aspect, I completely agree with you. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be aligned.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And also for me, then the second thing. Sorry, Mike,
Olga,
please.
And I think we had the discussion in early days in the Ivy, and I think the current design is really flexible and effective modular. I don't think there is a point or any value in mixing those. So this will be separate, and we need to build on that.
Yeah. Okay. This was just suggestions. Thanks. And for different approaches, again, if you think about building application on top of the APIs and somebody trying to understand the APIs, etc., we have active inventory that Bo is doing through augmentation from RFC 345 and references to the active inventory, and from the passive inventory, it's completely different approach. So I would kind of suggest that I don't see the reason for having completely different way of modeling relationship between topology for the passive and active inventory. It's the difference to me is what's fully managed versus what's not managed or what's discovered automatically versus what's added manually. But they're all topological entities in the network with connectivity between them, So conceptually, I don't see the difference. Thanks.
Thank you, Olga. Any final comment or question to on this one? If not, I think that it's time to conclude. Thank you all, I would say, for this positive and constructive discussion on the various items. So let's please continue this in this spirit and continue involving, I would say, the NMOP, IV, and OPS working group in the various open items. So in terms of next steps, I think what we have here is that there are a set of open issues and that need to be closed, and so that's one to be for you, Olga. That please try to drive those on the mailing list and close as many items that we can if there are conversions on this. we also discussed with Benoit that it would be really useful that we can have more, I would say, discussions and details on the work which is currently conducted by Pierre and Vivek. So yeah, please consider sharing the hackathon find in Bangkok. So we will be likely scheduling a session only on this matter. So yeah, please, if you are interested on this, let us know. Other than that, I don't know, Benoit, if you have other items that that you wanted to add.
So yeah, the interaction between Ivy and NMOP. And the only thing I would add is that there was like a lot of energy in the last couple of days solving issues. So what would be ideal is that before now and the IETF, we continue on that track, because the point in Bangkok is not to show, you know, okay, we already did this and that, but to spend the time to clearly close some action items. So it's better to have like a more focused discussions and to progress the document. So that's all I wanted to add.
Exactly. So thank you all for attending this interim meeting, and yeah, keep the this energy on the ongoing. So thank you.
Thank you all.